Thanks for listening. Bioaccumulation and biomagnification. What are they? Bioaccumulation is the buildup of pollutants over time. So this could be pollutants or toxins that are in a living organism or in the tissues of an organism. This can happen to animals at any trophic level, and they can accumulate different toxins or pollutants into their body. Now, whenever we talk about trophic level, that means the hierarchy of levels in an ecosystem. So you think of your producers and your consumers and your predators. Basically, it's all the different levels of a food pyramid. We have different trophic levels in a food pyramid. So the first trophic level is producers. That's your plants, phytoplankton if we're talking about the ocean. Second is our primary consumers, like our herbivores, our grasshoppers, or things like bunny rabbits, or in the ocean it would be copepods and the zooplankton. The third trophic level is our secondary consumers like carnivores, our small fish, spiders, frogs. Then we go up to tertiary consumers, which are not necessarily our apex predators, but they are some of the predators in that level. And then of course we have decomposers at the very, very end of that trophic level. So how do toxins accumulate? So whenever substances or pollutants enter the organism, and it could be from breathing, intaking in their food, absorbing into their skin, or having contact with a toxin, and there's all kinds of different ways, but those are the main ways. And how we kind of break it up is organismal bioaccumulation. That means that if there's contaminated water, there's a buildup in the organism itself. So if the compounds are present in the environment, over time they get a little bit more and more concentrated. So in fish, they have these fatty tissues, and if they're in pollutant water, they will slowly start to build up toxins inside of their fatty tissue because they're in the environment, and they're still in that same environment. Trophic transfer is whenever substances that are accumulated, just like we were talking about those fatty tissues, they transfer from one animal and a trophic level to the other. So if we have a producer and a consumer, and there's toxins in the producer, that the consumers will then absorb the pollutants. So that means the higher you are in that food pyramid, that would be the highest concentration of that toxin. So a lot of our apex predators suffer with higher concentrations of toxins because of that. And then there's soil bioaccumulation. So there's also toxins in the soil, and that's from different wastes that are dumped into sites that will bind to the soil particles, and then until they're kind of removed from erosion or taken up by plants or microorganisms, they're just going to stay in that environment. So the source of pollutants come from different types of places. We have organic contaminants, and these are things that you're like, oh my gosh, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, those are great things. But whenever you have too much, my grandfather always says, too much of a good thing can be bad, and this can lead to eutrophication. So this would be whenever, if there's the mouth of a river going from the mainland to the ocean, there's a lot of nutrients that are pouring out from all the different fertilizers that are going into farmlands, and a lot of these nutrients go into the river system and they're washed into the open ocean. When that happens, there's an excess of nutrients, which means there's an excess of plankton that are in the ocean, and because there's so much plankton, they're taking up all the oxygen in the ocean. So right at the mouth of the Mississippi River, there's a dead zone. And because there's so much nutrients or so much plankton, they are using all the oxygen within an area, and then they have different, and they basically take all the oxygen out of one site and all the fish die around it. So a great example, this happens kind of in the Galveston, Kima area every once in a while, but whenever the water is really, really hot, there's less oxygen present in the water, which is kind of interesting. It's just so hot on the surface water. It's not as conducive environment for the amount of oxygen. So there is already less oxygen in the water in the late summer. So like August, September. And usually we get a lot of fish kills from nutrients that are flowing from some of the river systems. And especially if they've had a lot of fresh water, they will have dead zones, and then a bunch of dead fish will wash up on the shore. So that does actually happen. It's pretty common. Agriculture and industrial waste. So this would be chemicals from fertilizers, inorganic fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides that can contaminate soils, and they go inside the bodies of water, because if there's rain that's being washed into rivers, and the rivers eventually lead to the ocean. So I have a picture here of the United States watershed. You can see where the most water is coming out, but all of these different river systems all lead to the ocean. And so it is something that even if you're in Dallas or in, some of our upper states, those connection rivers go all the way out to the Gulf of Mexico. So it is really important to kind of know our location and know where these toxins are coming from. The last is mining. So with mining, they're tearing up the ground in a specific area, and this makes lots of heavy metal deposits, and that can also go into the river systems and increase chemical toxicity of the water in that one level. Now, what is biomagnification? So biomagnification is a result of bioaccumulation. That we measure this in parts per million, ppm. So it's just the tendency of pollutants to concentrate as they move from one animal to the next. So we have bioaccumulation is how those animals get the toxins, and biomagnification is talking about how those toxins, how that accumulation has increased between the trophic level. So it's not necessarily talking about one specific organism. So say we're talking about fish living in one polluted river. That's not necessarily biomagnification. Biomagnification is talking about how at the very top of that food chain, they're receiving these toxins and this accumulation of toxins from the different trophic levels. So pollutants have long lives, and this is what we kind of define pollutants as. They're biologically active, they're mobile and soluble in fats. And so there are some toxins where we think about our bodies. We have our liver, which gets rid of toxins, our kidneys, we have gallbladders, we have all different types of expelling toxins through waste. But these are specifically talking about pollutants that will not be expelled by the natural process of an organism. It's absorbed by the predator in the next step. So that's kind of how we talk about those pollutants and how we talk about biomagnification. A great example is this image here, where we have these dots represent our toxins. We have our toxins that are absorbed from source pollutant goes into the soil, and these contaminants can go up the trophic level all the way up to the apex predator, as well as be put into our air, so it can be harmful for us to breathe that in. Another example is with whenever you're looking at parts per million, we can look at the numbers. So we can say water has one magnification concentration all the way up to our fish-eating birds, from our producers, zooplankton, small fish, all the way up to our large marine birds. So seeing that magnification, that concentration accumulate and magnify throughout that process. Now, this has a harmful effect on more than just animals. There's a couple examples, and one that is commonly referred to whenever we're talking about biomagnification and bioaccumulation is DDT. Now, DDT is a chemical found in aerosols when using pest control. So if you look at your mosquito spray, there might be a little DDT in it. What they used to do is they would go up in planes and they would spray it around their crops to make sure that other animal or other bugs were not harming their plants. This would go down the river systems, and it would go through the process of bioaccumulation, biomagnification, all the way up to the large marine birds like golden eagles, bald eagles, California condor, and brown pelicans. And the devastating effect of this biomagnification of these pesticides is that the eggs that the birds were laying were so soft. They just were not strong enough to withstand even the weight of the mother bird. So as the mother bird would sit on her eggs to be able to keep them warm, the eggs would break, and it really caused a big decline on those animal species, caused a lot of those bird species to become endangered species. And that is, whenever we talk about endangered species or threatened species, they all have a different level based on factors that are harming them in the environment. So all of those birds that I just mentioned went into endangered species status because of the amount of DDT. Now it is no longer able to be sprayed on crops that in such a wide capacity, and that's one of the examples that we learned of through that process. So if you've ever heard, don't eat too much fish or you'll have too much mercury in their body, that's true. And now it's even more of a prevalent point because there's so much mercury emissions into the environment. Here's a kind of an example of the different countries that are producing mercury emissions and what those emissions are coming from, whether that's combustion or mining or cement or consumer products. There's all kinds of different ways that different toxins go into the environment, and it has increased, and that's why there's more mercury in fish, and that's why you can't eat as much fish because of mercury biomagnification in those fish. So humans do bioaccumulate toxins. We are predators. We are, there's countless examples. There's lead poisoning, asbestos, mercury from fish. There's so many more of ways that toxins are being absorbed even in us as humans. So what can we do about this? Now this is a big problem. I mean, it's really hard for us to say, I'm going to fix this problem tomorrow. There are some solutions that people are working on now to try and eliminate, and that would be getting rid of some of those heavy metals that manufacturing companies are using, making sure that they're cognizant, they're paying attention to what they're using, what's being put out into the environment. That a lot of environmental lawyers, environmental engineers play a big role in that. Making sure harmful substances like motor oil are recycled and recycled properly. That way they're not going into river systems or in storm drains. Knowing what you're eating. Paying attention to the food labels. Anything that's really not, anything that has a really long word that you don't know, maybe Google that word. You'll find an answer to what that is. You can always wash your fruits and vegetables before consuming, knowing that those pesticides are being used on commercial fruits and vegetables. Maybe wash those fruits and vegetables with a little soap and hot water to make sure that they're good for consuming. A lot of people know that you're not supposed to microwave styrofoam, but you're also supposed to avoid microwaving plastics and eating off of plastics that are not BPA safe. So there are all kinds of different plastics, and plastics are made from what is it called? Petroleum, like oil. So they are made out of oil and petroleum, and so whenever you're eating off those plastics, if it's not a safe plastic, then you're going to be consuming some of those, you're going to be bioaccumulating some of those toxins. Using cleaning products that are gentle on the environment. There's a lot of chemicals out there that are being used in cleaning, and a lot of times you need to use really strong chemicals, but if you don't need to use those strong chemicals for cleaning, you can try to use gentle and environmental friendly cleaning products. If you're just spraying off your table and trying to get it ready for your family to eat, make sure you're using something that's environmentally safe, because it's gentle on the environment and it's also gentle on you. Choose fish that you're consuming wisely. There are so many apps now that you can ask your waiter or waitress, where is this fish coming from? A lot of times that they will know, or they have it on their menu, and you can actually look and see if it's been farmed properly. Mariculture is the farming of fish, or the catching of fish for human consumption. There are so many different apps that can tell you if that food is safe, especially in the ocean. It's really cool. So make sure you download some of those apps and make sure that you're getting a good source of fish. And then this one's kind of a given, but avoid spending time in contaminated areas. Some of those areas, sometimes you just have no idea. So make sure to kind of look out for those areas that you're like, I don't know if this is a great place for me to be hanging out and breathing this air. So those are some really good examples for us to be able to avoid bioaccumulation and biomagnification just on our own level. And then this is also a really great topic for us to talk about, since it is it affects the entire world, and not just the ocean, but us as well that are living inside of this earth. Thank you guys for listening, and I hope you guys learned something.